Hey, Eyal. Hey, audience. Thank you for joining us on this Thursday, almost the end of the week. Audience, thank you so much for joining us. I know I am so pumped about this fireside chat. It's going to be very special, and I'm so excited to hear from Eyal and Pete on how to scale your company. But first, let's give folks a few minutes to join. Audience, why don't you go to the chat on your right-hand side and tell us where you're calling from? We'd love to hear from you. And let me do a quick icebreaker with my speakers while we wait for the people to go in the chat and let us know. What is the best movie you watched recently, Pete?
Well, it's Christmas time here, and I've got a 5-year-old, so I think we're kind of like watching The Grinch Stole Christmas on repeat. So I don't know if that's the best movie I've watched recently, but it certainly is the most frequent one I've been watching recently.
It's a good one. I like that one.
All right, I'm
What
glad you like.
what about you, Ail?
Well, I don't get a chance to watch a lot of movies, but I finally had some downtime on the weekend, so I watched actually American Underdog. It was a kind of excitement, get some football in there, get a real, down and under story and all that. And I don't know, it was one of these, even got a little tear jerk at the end of it, sort of thing, happy ending. But it was actually a cool movie. I was really impressed with it.
Little
Oh,
American football in alongside the World Cup, right? So two great tastes taste great
Yeah,
together.
I had to get grounded a little bit. Too much of that soccer. Let's get
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I see the audience saying there's people from all over the world. That it's fantastic. So let's kick things off. I know, audience, you are very excited. You're not here to hear from me, but we are ready to start talking about future improving your 2023 growth engine. And today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar with MSP, we are the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, sales enablement, aka our modern sales pros. And our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they would struggle to solve on their own and help them see corners they might not know about. And we do that through live sessions like this one you're about to experience. We have a robust online forum. We have quarterly summits, which are very fun. And we are starting to get back to in-person events. So you're going to hear from us about in-person events next year. And if you're not already part of the MSP crew, you will be invited to join right after this event. And as I mentioned, we have quarterly summits, and we just launched our mega SKO in January, from January
Mega.
24th to 26th, 2023. We are organizing more than 20 events. It's going to be more than 5,000 modern sales pros in attendance. We have 60 plus high caliber speakers. You can hear from leaders at Drift, Sales Loft, Lean Data, Stage 2 Capital, plus so much more. Don't miss out next year. Sign up today. I'm going to put a link in the chat right now for your audience to go ahead and sign up for this summit next year. But that's enough about other events. Let's focus on how to get the most out of this one here. First of all, this event is being recorded, so your audience will be able to retrieve the recording in the MSP website in the previous events page. And I will also send a follow-up email for you with the link, so you have the information handy when you most need it. And also, let's send them a lot of questions. It's not always that we have two CROs available to answer your questions. So please use the chat and the Q&A in your right-hand side panel to send them a lot of questions, and we will get to them during the event. MSP is great, and we do not work alone. We have DealHub sponsoring this event today. I have Eyal here. Eyal, can you tell us a little bit about what DealHub is up to?
Sure, great. And it's great to be here today. So thanks. DealHub is first and foremost a CPQ. Now, we actually refer to ourselves as a next-gen CPQ, which sounds like something, wow, everybody says next-gen something, but we've really taken CPQ to a different kind of level in the sense that how we guide salespeople through the process, something we call a playbook, to really make it easy for them in a very natural language. So don't have to know your products, simply walk through your discovery process. You can pick out the right products. We've attached onto that document generation, so you don't have to go searching anywhere else to get a nice document. We put in what we call digital deal rooms, the ability to actually engage with your buyers in an ongoing environment and track their engagement interests and all that. E-signature built right into that, and a lot of other capabilities. So more than just putting together a quote, as detailed as you need it, you have that other capability of actually managing that process throughout your sales process or the buyer's journey, if you want to look at it that way, and reacting and interacting with the buyer throughout the process. And all that's provided today in one solution.
Fantastic.
Love it.
Yeah, it sounds like perfect. Audience, you can have all this just by clicking at the request a demo with our sponsor button at the top of this page. And we also have a booth set up for you. You can go and check what DealHub is about. We have Pete and Eyal here today to talk about all you need to know for your 2023 planning. Pete is going to be our moderator for this session. So Pete, I'm going to pass the mic to you. You can introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about Atrium, and then we can start the conversation. I'll be back later for some outro notes, but enjoy the conversation. It's your time to shine.
All right, wonderful. Well, hey folks, my name's Pete Kazanjy. I'm one of the founders of Atrium over here. Atrium makes data-driven sales management software that helps sales managers and leaders use metrics to improve team performance. That's my day job. My last company was a recruiting software company called Talent Bin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And so that's kind of where I got into modern sales. Was I went from being a business generalist founder at Talent Bin to being our first seller, to being our first sales manager and sales leader. And then when we were acquired by Monster, I was responsible for new product sales over at Monster. Subsequent to that, ended up writing a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and then started Modern Sales Pros. So do a little thinking about sales, just a bit, just a bit. Eyal, maybe you can kind of share with folks kind of what you spend your time doing at a DealHub, kind of briefly, and then we're going to kind of get into a little bit of your background later on. Okay.
Sure. So I'm the CRO at DealHub, actually one of the co-founders. So I've been around since day one. One of the most exciting periods of my life. I thought at one point it would get easier actually as we get bigger, and actually just gets, I guess, more work, but it continues to be fun. So
different hard.
Definitely a different kind of hard. Every day is a new, or every couple of days is a new kind of experience and all that. So I've just seen the company through its growth from starting off from zero sales all the way to where we're at today, where we've got tens of salespeople, SDR teams, pre-sales folks, strategic alliances teams. All those fall under my direct leadership today, and just keeps me really busy all day long. And
I love it. And so, I mean, I guess maybe you could share a little bit more about your background and how you got into the CPQ world. I mean, I know that DealHub's been around for a second, and obviously, since you're one of the co-founders there, you've been working on that for more than a second. But maybe you could kind of share how you got into CPQ and some of the things that you did before DealHub.
Well, my background's a bit varied. As a salesperson, it's kind of weird. I started off as an engineer and went and do some sales to start with, and then moved around a little bit between marketing and business development and pre-sales, and really had a good time just doing all kinds of different things. Got together with the two co-founders in our last company. This is going back already about 11 years ago. We met up, and when we had all three of us had left there, we basically there was an idea to come up with CPQ. For me, it was kind of interesting because going back to my first job working as a junior salesperson at Hewlett Packard, at the time they called it that, or HP, we had configurator solutions back then that were homegrown solutions on big sort of mainframe and mini frames, whatever they called them at the time. And so I had the experience from doing that. And so it sounded interesting. I had to convince my wife that I'm going to go work a little bit without getting any pay. Hopefully that works out for you. She gave me a bit of slack on that. And so really the company founded in 2014, got some investment and really kicked it off. And since then, like I said, it's just been a roller coaster, fun ride, and learned a lot. I knew a lot about configurating before. I thought I knew it. I think I learned a lot more ever since. So, there's a lot there.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because as you were kind of giving your elevator pitch earlier, I was like, wow, that's a lot of functionality. And as a software entrepreneur, one of the things that you come to appreciate is that software takes a long time, a lot longer than you'd think, right? And so as I was kind of thinking that, I was like, wow, how long are these guys? I couldn't remember exactly how long DealHub has been around, but now it makes sense that it was founded in 2014, because it's okay, cool. That's you with that much time offset, you can build a lot of capability. Now that being said, I think I mean, like you see this on the Modern Sales Pros forum quite a bit, that people don't love CPQ products, or at least they have kind of like a, there's something in the water. There's like a little bit of a vibe. Like people don't have like a great impression of CPQ products. And like I have a hypothesis around that, but I'm just like kind of in the cheap seats, as as like a frontline, front row kind of observer of this. Where do you think that comes from? Because like, in general, keeping reps from making like math errors that then like bite them in the ass, would seem like a good thing, and people would be happy about that. And yet people, seem to be like, oh man, where's that come from, do you think?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I've got actually my own pet peeve when it comes to the CPQ world, is I think a lot of people forget that you need that C. It stands for configure, and
Yeah.
the part of configure, price, quote. And a lot of CPQs don't really do that configure side of things. Some of them will come back and tell you, the better ones will tell you, hey, you made a mistake, but then you've got to go back and fix it. Now, what's a salesperson hate the most is being told you did something wrong. They'd rather, I think, be guided through a process. You'll never get a salesperson to admit that they like to be guided by the hand, but that's really what they want. Don't let me make a mistake. Just help me do it. Make it really simple. Make it really intuitive. And I think that's where a lot of software solutions forget who their end customer is, who's their end user. In the case of a salesperson, like I like to call them, when I talk to customers, I don't say how many salespeople you have, how many complainers do you have? Because that's what we are. We're just complaining all day long. So take away those complaints. When you look at what the salesperson is looking for, what they're doing all day long, what's bothering them, and then you go and build your solution around that, all of a sudden you don't have those issues. And I think that's where a lot of CPQs have failed, or a lot of solutions that claim to be CPQs. First and foremost, they don't help you with configuring and telling you what you're able to do, as opposed to going back and taking away later on. I sort of, there's the old joke where you say when you go to the candy store, they like the person who gives a little bit of candy and adds a bit more to make the weight to what you wanted, as opposed to the one that takes away something. So you want that helps guide you through the process, and not the one that comes and tells you, go back and fix it, go back and fix it, go back and fix it. And then we sound like our kids, in the car, are we there? Are we there? Are we there? And that sort of thing. So that's where I think a lot of problems in CPQs, we just don't think of that end user, what they want.
I think that's really prescient, because you can kind of see that other places in like sales operations and like, operationally excellent sales organizations, like use validation rules as an example, right? Like so much of what we're doing with CRM is really kind of like keeping the business like in a good rigorous state, if you will. I mean, that's like what a database is for managing state, right? And so what we need to make sure that we do is like we're not putting things into the database that is incorrect and that could drive like a downstream process that is broken or stupid or whatever. And so like a great example of that like one way that sales operations people of course do this is with like validation rules, right? And so I think that that's kind of one of the things that you're observing right now, like an annoying version of close winning an opportunity, or like if you're an SDR, creating an opportunity is a bunch of validation rules where he goes, you forgot this, you forgot this, you forgot this.
And then you got to go find all those red boxes and red text that tells you made all these mistakes, and you have no idea then why it didn't accept it.
Right. Versus, a more modern version, and Salesforce has done this, of like flows, right? Where it's just like, hey, we're going to take you through the flow, right? The configuration, if you will, of, if you're an SDR, of creating opportunity, or like, here's the flow for close winning an opportunity, or here's a flow for, logging a, economic buyer, meeting, or, fill in the blank or whatever. So I think that that's a really kind of, compelling point there around, around that, how that works with CPQ. I think one thing you're kind of, like, I get it on the salesperson side. I think the other thing though, that like it, and you can kind of see this in the modern sales forum like crazy, is just like the caloric intensity of like historically deploying a CPQ solution, and like kind of as a student of kind of like history, or like, software history or what have you, one of the things that I think about is how certain solutions were conceived of for like with certain preconditions or like preconceptions. And so like if you think about like historical CPQ, like back in the day, you were kind of joking about it with HP or whatever. A lot of it was like for manufacturing and kind of like stuff like that, where you had, like my dad's a mechanical engineer and a civil engineer or whatever. And it's, when he's specifying a water treatment plant or whatever, like there's a lot of like configuration that has to go into that, versus like, at Atrium, we sell like a couple SKUs, right? It's like this type of seed and this type of seed, and like we're on our merry way. And a lot of the legacy CPQ solutions out there, whether you're talking about like, I don't know, like big machines back in the day, or even like, they all have this like preconception that things have to be complicated because it was complicated back in the day. Whereas a lot of times nowadays, people have like far less complicated, pricing and kind of configuration situations. So it's kind of like, you see these sales operations folks are like, oh man, I got to like implement CPQ. It's going to be like the first half of this year or whatever. It's kind of like you like, there's all this squeeze, but like not very much juice. And I think like what did you say earlier? Like a more modern approach there might like reimagine that and say, hey, well, like what is the minimum viable version of CPQ look like for an organization that doesn't have like super sophisticated or super like fussy configuration, so they can get started fast, but at the same time can be extended if you do have complications. But if you're non-complicated, don't worry, it can be fast. If you are complicated, don't worry, we can extend to support that. And I think this is like when you hear like when sales operations people hear like the word CPQ, they kind of go like this and go like, oh God, there goes 180 days. Do you find that when you're kind of talking with customers?
Absolutely. I think CPQ was, as you mentioned in the past, if it's big machines, other solutions like that, it was a software solution. Someone came in and actually coded it specific for your use case. It may have been a cloud solution, but it was like an on-prem. It was actually customized specifically for you. And then you need programmers in there, and then you need those 180 days, or that's even pretty quick for a lot of CPQs, or you're looking at 9, 12 months.
I'm trying to be generous.
To get that.
Trying to be positive.
Yeah, customers tell us, yeah, we're looking to implement next summer. It's like, why is it? We had a customer a few months ago and saying that to us, or back in October. It's like, why next summer? It's like, oh, because it's going to take us 6 or 9 months. I said, well, what if I could have you running in January? And they said, interesting. We ended up closing them in October. They'll be going live in January. We came out with a configured solution, which not only makes it quicker and easier to implement, it actually allows the sales operations people to do it on their own. So they don't have to go beg and borrow time from the IT people to get that done. They can make the setup on their own. They can make the changes on their own. When the CRO comes to them or CEO says, hey, tomorrow we're changing our business model, we want all the pricing in a different way. It's not, okay, give me six weeks to go and get that scheduled, and then we can go do it. It's, how about I sit on it tomorrow and give me 2 days and I'll come back to you and have a look at that. So there's got to be more agility today to deal with the issues that change today. Products, pricing, processes are changing. If it's software, obviously that's the name of the game, but even other industries as well. Things are constantly changing. And if you're stuck thinking about a solution that's going to need those 180 days or 3 months every time you need to make a change, it's not a solution that's helping you in the business world, because it's not keeping pace with the business changes. So we definitely hear that a lot. And we come up with a solution that actually addresses that in a very nice way.
Yeah, and I think that's probably like pretty timely for a lot of folks right now, because I think like the topic of change and the ability to react to it is something that organizations really value in times of kind of like turbulence, if you will. And so, I think that's right now, obviously there's, some kind of like ferment and tumult going on. When you think about how your customers are thinking about like their deal management and pricing management and all those, and configuration management, things like that, how should they be thinking about how that can be a source of advantage for them in kind of fussy economic times? Like, I think one thing that kind of pops to mind there is just like being crisper around pricing, pricing discipline and kind of things like that. But also, I guess another thing is kind of reactivity, right? And like being able to rejigger things. What are your kind of thoughts there on how how that can be a source of advantage as opposed to liability?
Well, definitely in times like this, what people need to make sure is they've got controls and governance over their pricing, their discounting, more than in other times. So definitely by having a CPQ that's going to allow you to make sure that you're pricing the right way, you're using the right pricing for the times, you're not using old configurators, making sure that you've got a smooth way to go and get those approvals and quickly get the approvals, because it's still time to market. Even more important now, getting back to the customer. The customer's also waiting on you, and they've also got their own issues and all that. So you've definitely got to have something, a solution that adapts very well to the way your salespeople are, making sure that they're not doing the things they're not allowed to do, put those controls around it, but not bog them down as well. The whole idea is to make things still simple for the salespeople, but let them get back to the customers as well. So it's definitely in times like this, I think in any times, but I think especially now, people are really looking at, their margins and things like that. You want to make sure that that CPQ and is agile, because things are changing, on a daily, weekly basis right now. You got to make sure that if you have to go in and make those adjustments, you want that capability. It's definitely something we hear all the time from our customers.
Yeah, maybe you can say a little bit more about that, about how people might be wanting to think about, like, kind of like taking another look at their pricing and kind of like taking another look at their kind of like discount approaches, things like that, to make sure that like the deals that they're doing are actually like, beneficial for the organization as opposed to upside down for the organization. Maybe you can kind of talk a little bit more about that.
Well, definitely they want to have the ability that they can have visibility into what the salespeople are doing. That rogue discounting way of doing things with a cowboy, you definitely got to control that, but you don't want to do it in a way that the salespeople are overly stressed. You want to give them the ability maybe to make the changes on their own. So give them visibility. If you look at it and how our CPQ works, you can immediately make it visible to the salesperson that they're going to need an approval and why they're going to need that approval.
Right.
So first of all, they can go and quickly get back to the customer and see what their limits are. And when you do have that ability, that need to go into the approval process, make sure that the approvers are quickly getting the information. What we've done is made it possible to actually customize the messages that go out to the approvers, so they get exactly the information that they need. They know why they're getting it. You give them the reminders, the pings, to make sure that they're on top of things so things don't get lost. Or you can let the admins come in if someone's slowed down, go in there, find out, check out the SLAs on things. If it's not staying on top of it, maybe reroute it to somebody else. Keep constant that pace going very quickly. You don't want to be slowing that down. So while you do have to put those controls in place, you also don't want to hurt your business by going back too slow on that. So we put all those kinds of capabilities into the CPQ to control it, yet give the flexibility to the salespeople, and also make sure that agility or that velocity of your sales process continues.
Got it. So let's talk a little bit about, people are thinking about their kind of like planning for 2023 and, and like what they're going to be doing, to grow in 2023. People are kind of like reconsidering some of their growth plans, or like, reforecasting them and what have you. Maybe you can talk a little bit about some best practices around kind of like the setting up of growth engines, and kind of like a process around how you guys and your customers think about what that process looks like.
Well, obviously things are changing all the time right now with the markets. So I think the one thing people have to realize is change is happening, but I think you still have to adapt to that change. So that's going into 2023. We're seeing that with a lot of customers where they're looking at what solutions that they want to go into, but business is still going on. They're still going to have to do something and have some solutions in place. And a lot of times what we're hearing is they're having to do a little bit more with a little bit less. So I think it's important to look at your tools right now and seeing what are the tools that are going to help you do things. And where DealHub comes in, for example, is giving you a bunch of capabilities. So it's CPQ, there's contract management built into it. You've got different capabilities that are built into the same solution, so you can do a lot more with just that one solution. So you've got to be able to have something that's still going to allow you to maintain that pace, make sure that you're growing. Even if things slow down in 6, 9, 12 months from now, we're going to be back into things, hopefully. You have to be ready for that. So you have to be looking at your 2023 plans right now, not in terms of just where we are right now, because the market seems to have gone down, but what's going to happen in that period a year from now, but also what's going to happen throughout the year. You got sales teams, they still have to keep working, and how do you do that? Now, a lot of things people are also looking at is consolidating tools. And again, that's where DealHub comes in really nicely, where we can give you a lot of capabilities in one solution, because really, when times are good, we buy a lot of solutions, we do a lot of different things. But what happens is when things get a little tough, you have to start looking at what's going to give you value. So, best practices, looking at your solutions. What are the ones that you're using? What are the ones that you really need? What's being used actually? What's not being used? How can you bring a lot of things into the fold of what you've already have? I think another area that we're seeing a lot is we started seeing a lot more, obviously, when the coronavirus was around a lot more. We were all working from home and we're all disengaged, but you need to start learning a lot more of how your sales process is working. We're still talking with a lot of people from their bedrooms today. We're not seeing them face to face in meetings. We need to understand what's happening. So you need the ability to gather some data on what's actually happening. And we're seeing a lot of organizations starting to go into this area as well, providing data of how people are engaging with you and how to understand that buyer process a lot better. So these are kinds of things that you got to be looking at, I think, as well now, the different kinds of tools that are going to give you that ability, one, to gather the information, also to visualize that information, understand your buyers a lot better. So those are some of the things that we're seeing, some of the capabilities that we're adding into 2023, but there's changes around and you have to really, make sure that you're adapting to those and seeing what's coming out.
What would be examples of having a better understanding of like what the buyer process is looking like and making sure that you have that information available to you?
Well, one of the things that we've got with our solution, I talked about earlier, digital deal rooms, is the ability to actually share with a customer or engage with a customer through, think of it like almost like a virtual conference room. So we can set up a web page, it's dynamic, it's automated for that opportunity that you're working on. And then all the content that you want to engage with the customer is shared over there. So it could be videos, it could be text, obviously your proposal, your contracts. Right from there, people can look at the information, they can share the information with others. They can download the services agreement and make edits to it and bring it back up into there. So you're going to bring the legal people into the fold, or the contracts folks to come in. And one of the things as that's being shared is you're actually able to track and see who are the people that are coming in, who's engaged with the content, who's looking at it and really spending time on it. So you start to understand, if you want to even call it that, digital body language of those buyers that are out there. And there's multiple buyers on your customer side, how they're actually engaging with the content. Are they really engaging with it? What's of interest to them? Who's coming in at what pace? And that's the kind of information that if we were all going to meetings as we used to go face to face, we'd be able to look someone in the eye and see exactly what they're feeling. Now we have to do that through a digital format, and that's what our deal rooms allow you to do. So all the different things that you're doing with building out your quote through CPQ, with your CLM, building out the contract, all the other information, but we're presenting it to the customer, and all the different stakeholders can come in, look at that, and we're able to understand what they're actually doing with that and their interest level.
Got it. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think probably one of the things that folks are really thinking about right now is not like lovely upsides and what have you, but instead kind of like surmounting challenges and kind of contending with kind of wobbly sales cycles and things like that, constrained budgets, etc. What are your kind of some of your thoughts on how organizations can best approach like surmounting those challenges? I mean, I think one thing you kind of just noted is being tighter on kind of like the deal process and making sure that you really have a lot of information around like the buying committee and so on and so forth. We just kind of talked about that. What are some of the other things that you might recommend to folks for thinking about overcoming the growth challenges in 2023?
Well, they definitely have to understand, I think, what the customer is interested in and make sure that you're providing the right relevant information. I think that's one of the things that you gather when you're looking. We can see what someone is interested in. Are they actually engaging with it? Now, there's the immediate understanding as a salesperson to do that, but I think also taking that information back into the organization and understanding what is the content that's actually resonating with the customer. So, it's nice to go and send something to a customer, but if they're not looking at it, they're not engaging with it, and there's obviously not a lot of value over there, and you don't know what they're doing then with their time. They're obviously not looking at your information. So you definitely want to be able to go and learn from those things that they're doing, what's of interest to them, and being able to use that to take your next steps, to really understand what's your next best action based off of how people are engaged. So you want to be able to, learn from that capability or that ability to understand what they're interested in and be able to feed that back into a process. And when we take salespeople, for example, through what we call a playbook to build up the configuration, that playbook can also recommend other kinds of content to be used as well. So based on where the customer is in their buyer cycle, what they're looking to do, what products and services you're offering them, you can actually recommend the right things to do as well. So you want to make sure that you're always relevant to the customer, and we want to provide the ability for the salesperson to have that information. If they're a new salesperson, they don't know it, they haven't been fully onboarded, but give them the process, the guidance to do that, so they don't actually have to be have spent 3-6 months in the job, they can actually get that information or that ability to get the right information out to the customer at the right time. So you want to look at how you can help those salespeople as well, from both presenting them the right thing to do and also learning from what's happening as the customer's engaging.
Yeah, I think one thing that that I just recently read the book, The Jolt Effect, which is written by the same folks who also wrote the Challenger sale back subsequent to the 2008 great financial crisis. And I think that a couple of the things that they talk about, obviously the Challenger sale is all about like really front and centering the cost of doing nothing and kind of like what you stand to lose, making sure that that's like really super clear, that like the status quo is really untenable. And then the Jolt Effect book is focused on like once you've gained agreement that the status quo is really untenable, which is kind of like the cost of doing nothing. How do you herd people in the direction of sufficient of like making the actual decision? Because sometimes people can know that they shouldn't, like that the status quo is not tenable and still not act. What are some of the ways that you see organizations, successful organizations kind of doing both of those things? Like one, really making it clear the cost of doing nothing is untenable. And then secondarily, once that's been, that's been appropriately characterized or kind of agreed, kind of herding the deal committee or the buying committee across the line.
Well, we tend to find in working with customers with need CPQs, you look at some of the costs of not doing anything it can be different things. Some of them is making mistakes on quotes. You're losing out money. You're giving away too much discount, or you're making mistakes. You're not charging enough. So a lot of these things, what's the point of the organization there is you're losing out a lot. Sometimes they nickel and dime us on how much the per user price is, but when they look at the tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, hopefully not, of money that they're losing, that's things that they have to we bring to their attention. How long does it take to get back to customers? The one thing customers want is someone to get back to them right away, and they don't want those delays. So how do you look at those within the organization? What kind of processes do you have, and how can you put some automation into there and control that? So those are kind of things that we talk to customers about, and we see that really resonates with them. Yeah, that's right. We've got this really manual process. It takes days till we get back to the customer, and those are things that are hurting them. So that cost of doing nothing, it's sometimes very hard to sort of put a value around that or a number around that. But you have to get them to understand there's a lot of cost when you're just looking at using the same old ways. The number of customers that we talk to that are still using Excels and Word documents and PDFs and PowerPoints to send out their quotes, and they have no visibility into their organization. They have no ability to even understand what their forecast is, because salespeople are just closing deals and then they came out of nowhere, or they don't know what they're missing out on and not guiding them through that process. So there's a lot around that. Those are the kind of things that we talk about or hear from our customers of what they're looking at to address. And there's a lot of pains of just sitting there and doing nothing. There's a lot of tools out there, a lot of different kinds of tools, and organizations need to be looking at how they add in some of those automations into the process.
Nice. Yeah, I think another thing that maybe organizations can kind of like use, another kind of tool organizations can use to navigate the kind of existing kind of like concern that organizations might have around like biting off more than they can chew, and kind of like big implementations and what have you, is kind of the notion of like starting small. I know that this is something that we do quite a bit at Atrium, where oftentimes we'll start with a smaller sale, like a smaller part of the sales organization, when organizations are looking to make their organization more data driven and managed by metric and what have you. Can be a daunting prospect of doing that across like hundreds and hundreds of reps. But if you can start with like a 20-person sale, or like a 20-person SDR team or what have you, that can seem like a little bit more tenable, or like the SMB AE team or what have you. Is this something that you have observed with your customers as well, around kind of like, hey, let's like try to land small, de-risk things for folks, make somebody have a quick win, and then eventually like that can build into something a little bit more substantial?
Absolutely. What you just said there, quick wins. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned in this industry is people try to sometimes go out and do a big bang, do a huge project. It's going to take them literally 9 months, 12 months. The number of customers that have told me that they're in these projects have been running for 12 months. Management's asking them what's going on. The CFO is checking all the time, saying we just keep sending out more, paying off more invoices that are coming in from our implementer, and the money's going out, and nothing's coming in, and we're not seeing any value. So definitely those quick wins are key. And I talk to customers all the time when they're looking at these big projects. And it's not just the 20-person team rather than 200. It's why don't we take one process? Let's just work on new business right now for quoting, and then we'll do the renewals later on. Or let's just take one country and then we'll spread out the other country while we learn all the different things that we've learned by implementing in a smaller group. So the one, especially now, I think with the situation in the market right now where CFOs are basically just slashing all across because they're looking at, I'm going to put out money now, I'm only going to return in 12 months from now. Let's put the money into something else that's going to give us the return. Well, look at the way that you can get some money, get some return in the next 2 or 3 months. And that's what we talk to our customers. Don't do the whole project, do part of it. That also gives them a lot of value on the individual side, because I'm talking to a sales ops person and saying, you're going to look like a champion when you go in there and in 2 or 3 months, the CFO is going to say, hey, that's great, this is working. And you say, yeah, and in another 2 months from now, we got another part of that solution coming out. And then 2 months after that, and they actually see return for the money that's going out. So it's not just checks that are being written to go out. You're actually seeing some value by the organization. So I talk about this all the time. I just had a customer we closed about a month ago. I was talking to the CFO, and as soon as I said that, it was like, wow, this is incredible. The fact that we can actually do that and get some value right away instead of what they're used to, here, come pay the money now and let's talk in 12 months and see if that's working yet. So the quick wins, I think, is the way to go.
And I think there's an interesting point there, which is like that can be done in a success process, right? In the success motion, where it can also, but if you're only doing that there, you're actually not helping your win rate, right, in your deal cycle. And so I think because the perception might be, especially when you have I think we have a similar challenge that you guys have, which is there's a perception that the legacy way of approaching a problem, right, the legacy way of approaching CPQ is very heavyweight, and it feels like it has to be takes 6 months or 9 months to implement or what have you. The legacy way of using metrics to manage and data to manage teams traditionally involves legacy BI, right, which has a very, very heavy implementation costs, and then of course has its own kind of fussiness associated with ongoing usage, but bigger kind of the view of a big upfront lift. And I think that this is something that I coach my reps on all the time, is we have to we can't wait for them to ask that question in order to combat it. We have to show up and pre-handle that objection, because that's the status quo that's kind of sitting in their brain and in that context. And so I wonder to what extent that can be almost codified. We have this concept internally here at Atrium, we call it a minimum viable transaction, where what you want to have is, it can't just be the smallest of finger holds, because you need organizations to have an appropriate level of buy-in in order to change the way that they're doing things. But it doesn't have to be the entirety of it. It has to be minimally viable. And I wonder to what extent that can be codified in a CPQ process. And we have that codified in our sales playbook. And I wonder to what extent that can be even further codified to kind of encourage reps to target those smaller success lands. Maybe that's in the messaging, and then maybe that's also in messaging and slides, and then maybe it's also in deal templates as well. Have you guys seen anyone kind of approaching things that way?
Well, from our point of view, from my sales team, they know when they're going out to the customers, they talk about these things. They try to understand what they're trying to do and give them, I'd say educate them if you want. One of the things we find when we're talking to the customers, sometimes they've never done it before. We're obviously selling a CPQ, and sometimes they've never bought a CPQ before. And the only thing they knew about CPQ, or the last company they were at, they sat on the side and saw that they did a huge CPQ project, and it took that long time that we talked about to implement it. And we've got to educate them and tell them there is a different way, and it takes a bit of time. And one of the things that we do is we like to put together a quick little custom demo for them and show them, look how quick I could put that together. So you have that ability to go and do it in a modularize it, put it into different modules, different steps, different phases, and you're able to go and do that. So I just find it through educating. I think customers, you tend to think that the fact that a customer's come to look for a solution, that they know what they're looking for. They know what they're looking for. They don't know how it's done. They may, or I should take it back. They probably don't always know exactly what they're looking for. They know what their problem is. They don't know how to solve it. And we've got to go help them with the solution to that, and also how the ways that they can go and do that and implement that. So it comes down to asking the right questions. It's important for the salespeople, and it's not just discovering once, it's constantly discovering when the new stakeholders come on, asking them the questions as well to see where they're at and understand what their understanding is, and then work that. It's not just, a cookie cutter for everybody. You've really got to get in there, but especially I think the important thing is, as much as you don't want to say it, educate the customers, you do have to educate them. You have to tell them the value you can have and how they can do it. And that's what's really key. And that's what I train my salespeople to think that way.
Mm-hmm. And so when folks are kind of like thinking ahead about like future, quote unquote, future proofing their sales organization, because I think we'll see kind of like how 2023 plays out. Ideally, it's maybe a couple of quarters of monkey business, and then folks kind of getting back to more like business as usual. So you kind of don't want to like you want to be able to stay agile and not lock yourself into a constraint, right, that like may not be pertinent in excuse me, in 2 quarters or what have you. How do you guys think about and kind of recommend to your customers how to how to contend with that, how to make sure that you're future proofing your business, if you will?
Right. Well, I think the one word that comes to mind is agility. You've got to be agile. It means you have to have your tools that are also agile, because just as you said, things may be different now than what they are in a few months from now. That means your products may change. Your pricing is probably going to change. The discounts maybe that you allow, other things in your processes are going to change. Especially in turbulent times like now, you have to be able to have a solution that not only meets the needs of what you have today, but what's going to be next week, next month, and 6 months from now. And that also means that you have to have that ability to go and change it and on your own, as opposed to, like we said, having long programming cycles that you've got to go take 6 months to do it. If, like I said earlier, my example, if the CRO or the CO wakes up in the morning and says, hey, we're changing all our pricing model, you've got to be able to react to that today, and not 3 months later say, yeah, remember what you wanted 3 months ago? Here, I've got it ready. And they're going to say, wait a second, I've got a new plan that needs to come into play now. So you've got to be agile. You've got to be able to go and keep pace with those changes and do it. If it's not in real time, it's near real time. When we talk to customers, and what they can do with DealHub is they can make those changes in days. I had a customer several years ago change from like an on-prem pricing to a cloud-based pricing. I think we spent 3 or 4 hours with them and going and changing their whole CPQ cycle into something like that. So that's
really
agility. That's the ability to go and adapt to what the customer needs to do in real time, and not tell them, look, it's going to take us 3 or 6 months to do. I think the other thing to look at is make sure you're addressing, what it is that the buyers want and what they need, or have that ability to adapt to what they need, because they're changing as well. The buyers of what they want, how they want to get that information from you, those things, again, all part of agility, making sure you're able to do that. And even I think what I talked about earlier, being able to understand them, because they're not able to tell you that all the time. Understand the data, what's happening what are the things that are happening, how are things changing, and then be able to adjust to that. So you really have to stay on top of things. Agility, I think, is the key. It's not just because of the times now. We saw it earlier, because we're in a modern world that things are changing all the time. You've got to be able to keep pace with that. And that's what's super important for future proofing. Don't buy something that's locking you in and saying this is what you're stuck with for the next 1 to 2 years. You got to realize you're going to be changing in weeks your processes.
Yeah, I see that it's funny that it seems to be a theme, right, around like modern modern approaches to a problem that has been around. And so like a good example of that would be like commission software, right? Like legacy versions of commission software have historically required like a lot of calories to unwind or like change and what have you. And that's kind of we hear this a lot because a lot of the commission software companies end up presenting a lot of content here on MSP, and like commission software really, it's kind of the same sort of situation where like, hey, you might have a new product, or maybe you're trying to like change some sort of behavior on the part of the reps, and so maybe you change your pricing, or maybe you change the way that you compensate based on that product, or what have you. And so if that's going to take forever to implement, like you might just not do it, right? Like a good
Right.
example of that right now would be a lot of organizations are focusing in on servicing more of their existing clients and kind of getting more revenue out of existing clients, as opposed to net new clients, right? Who might not be who might not be taking on new vendors. And so the problem, of course, is that if it takes an act of Congress in order to modify that, your commission software or what have you, you're not going to be able to react and then take the get the business benefit out of that. And I'm kind of hearing a similar thing here with respect to CPQ, where if it takes an act of Congress, like there's kind of two things here. If it takes an act of Congress to get the configuration change or the pricing change or whatever, the worst part is there's like one bad version of that is like, okay, it just takes forever and like it costs a bunch of money and like that's annoying and so on and so forth. Probably like the worst situation is like you just say like, screw it, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to change, which I think is like really problematic, right? Because like the opportunity cost associated with like not changing behavior to react to the market realities is like pretty substantial there. How do does that kind of align with how what you guys have seen with your customers?
Well, definitely. And going back to what I was talking about earlier, like a lot of times, if it's not the CEO or the CFO or someone comes with a new price model, you're changing all the time. You're having to adapt your pricing, your business model to what's happening in the market. And if you can't get your tools to adapt to it, then you're stuck. You're in a bad place. You need to react quickly to how you're selling it. What ends up happening is people abandon the tools that they have and they go back to the Excels and they go back to doing things manually and all that because they have to keep pace. It's especially frustrating with salespeople. Salespeople, if they don't have what they want, they'll just go find the fastest way. It's like water, pouring down a hill or something like that. It'll find the fastest path to get to where it needs to get to. Same thing with salespeople. They're going to find the fastest way. They're going to abandon the tools. If you put in tools, you put them in for a good reason. If it's something like a CPQ, you want to obviously put controls around your quotes. You want to get all that information back into your CRM so your pipelines and your forecasts are correct. But if people are abandoning your tools, not only are you not gaining the right value you needed out of them, that you're paying a lot of money, you're not getting the right information going into your back-end processes, and the salespeople may be going back to making mistakes, and all of a sudden you've got a big mess there. If you don't have, and obviously I know the CPQ market better than maybe other tools, but if you don't have that tool that solution that's able to adjust itself to what's happening and do it in near real time, then you've got a big problem, not just in terms of the quoting, in terms of all the back-end processing that's happening. It means your forecasts, forget it, your pipelines, everything's off because you're no longer using the tools. So it's super important to have the ability to keep pace with those changes. And in today's world, they just happen faster and faster than they ever did before.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think that like positioning yourself for change is kind of like the theme here. And I think that to the extent that you can like positioning yourself for change, but then moreover thinking about how you can position yourself for change, but doing it in like a minimally viable way, right? For like without it's kind of like have your cake and eat it too, right? So you want to be able to position yourself for change, but be able to do it in a way that doesn't require like massive change management and so on and so forth, and also allows you to kind of get capture that value back quickly, is a theme that organizations can kind of see across the board. And I think that very much aligns with like how we sell Atrium. And it sounds like that's something that really resonates with how you guys sell DealHub, where it's like, hey, look, you can position yourself for change, for 2023 or what have you. But by the way, it's not going to be impossible, right? Like there's not going to be a huge investment loop before you start seeing utility coming back there. And I think that other sellers and sales leaders can probably learn from that, which is what can you do to position yourself to customers, so like in a way that helps them navigate a changing environment, but do it in a way where it's like put $1 in, get $3 back, but within like 90 days or 60 days or
Well,
what
it's
have
realizing
you.
that change is the new norm. It's not that it's change that it's gonna it might happen sort of thing. It's going to happen. It's part of the day-to-day process, and you actually have to plan for that. You have to know that you have the ability to go and change, whether it's tomorrow, in a week, in 3 weeks, whatever it has to be. You have to be ready for that, and that's part of the planning. It's part of looking at what tools you put in place and how you operate, knowing that I wouldn't. MVP is one thing to do it. I'd actually like to say, why just have it as an MVP? Why not just be able to go in there and change your processes very quickly? We look at customers that utilize our solution. They implement today. They start implementing today. In 2-3 months, they're up and running. 9-12 months from now, they're going to have a completely different process going on, and they're just continuously evolving the solution. They're not going and doing all of a sudden, more little big bangs. It's just continuously adapting to what's happening in the market with their sales process and just keeping pace with that. And that's what allows them to keep, being a very, move that velocity, keep that going, because they're able to adapt very quickly.
Nice. Well, in the last couple of minutes that we have here, Eyal, any kind of like closing thoughts on how organizations should be thinking about approaching 2023 and their kind of their growth engine within there?
Well, I think it is going back and looking at we talked about some of these things, going back, looking at the solutions that you have. It shouldn't be what we're seeing now, obviously, because we're going into 23, we're going into a very difficult year with what's happening, is make sure if you're cutting, and this is, I don't know if I'm begging to the CFOs who are saying no to some of these deals because they're slashing across the board. I think go back and look at what are the solutions that you need. What are the solutions that are going to help you, whether it's not just CPQ, other solutions that you're using. What are the right solutions that are going to help your salespeople be successful? Because if you're going to be affecting your business, obviously that's not the right thing. So you can't just be slashing across the board. You got to be looking very carefully at what are the tools that are helping you. In our case, when we come to customers, they do see the value of CPQ. It's something that helps them because it gives them the governance that they need. It gives the ability to respond quickly to customers. And that's one of the solutions that you'll be looking at. So they really have to look at that and make sure that those solutions, like we've talked about, are really agile, that they can keep pace with the changes. Because hopefully we're at the worst now, but who knows what's going to happen. You got to make sure you're able to adapt very quickly, because that's the one thing we know that's going to happen is you're going to have to adapt. So just make sure you've got the tools in place to do that.
Nice. Oh, hi, Eduardo. Hello.
Hey.
Are we? Are you here to kick us off stage?
We need to start wrapping things up. Can you hear me?
Uh-oh.
All right.
I can.
I'm back.
You sound like $1 million.
So we need to start wrapping things up here just because of time, and also because you shared a lot with our audience. I'm pretty sure they have a lot of notes in there. So thank you so much, audience, for joining us today and for attending this event. I hope you enjoy your Friday tomorrow and your weekend. You are the best part of MSP always. Thank you to our wonderful DealHub for sponsoring this event. We love having you with us, DealHub, and I'm excited about our next events. They're doing great things at DealHub, so make sure you check in their sponsor booth at the top of this page, and you can also request a demo right there, and their team will get in touch soon. Also, thank you, Eyal and Pete, for providing this great content. Again, audience, the recording will be available on our website pretty soon, and the key takeaways will also be available for you, and I will send a follow-up email. So while the speakers and I hang out backstage, you are free to go, audience, and enjoy the rest of your day. I will see you next time. Any closing thoughts in there, P?
Good to go. Thanks, Eduardo.
All right.
Appreciate you managing us. Eyal, great to hang out.